I wanted to talk today about diet mentality and neuroreceptor pathways. And I think these are like the two big reasons why my eating disorder developed and has continued over the years. Um, so I have tried so many times over the past 15 years to stop my eating disorder. I've done treatment, I've done therapy, I've done support groups, I've done trauma work, I've done self-help books, I've done programs, like I've done so many things, and I can get some temporary relief, but it's never permanent. And it hasn't been until recently where I've gotten permanent relief, and that obsession with food seems like it's been lifted significantly. Especially the urge to purge, like it's not even a thought I'm having anymore. I still want to restrict sometimes, but I do opposite action. I eat instead, I eat more instead. I push those voices out of my head, and then body acceptance is what I'm really working on. But I wanted to talk about this idea of diet mentality because I feel like all the times I was trying to recover before in the past, I never let go of dieting. So the first thing I wanted to clarify is, what is a diet? There were times when I was younger where I like really dieted, like I did South Beach diet or Atkins diet, some of those name diets. And so recently, like the past 6 years, 4 years, I haven't done any of those like name brand diets, so I didn't think I was dieting. Now I know that dieting doesn't have to be a specific diet. Dieting is when you have any kind of food rules, and when you break those food rules, you feel like shit. And I for sure relate to that. Even when I was coming out of treatment, I had good food and bad food, and I wasn't able to eat the bad food, and if I did, I felt like shit. So I was always restricting, right? If you have good and bad food, or for me, I'll talk in first person, when I have good and bad food, that leads me to restrict the bad food. So there's physical restriction, and then there's mental restriction. So if I don't eat the bad food, I'm physically restricting myself, and that's going to cause a part of my brain to be like, you're starving, you're restricting this food group. So that primal part of my brain is going to say, eat the food, eat all the food. So for example, one of the foods I restrict is chips. And so there's this voice in my head that's like, eat all the chips. When are you going to eat chips? You got to eat all of them. And then if I eat a chip, it turns into this massive binge. And then I feel like shit about myself. Then I compensate the behavior, normally by throwing up. And then I decide like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do better. I'm not going to eat any chips. I'm going to restrict even harder. So that's how that like restriction happens. We physically restrict some kind of food, really putting us into some kind of calorie deficit, or even if we're not in a calorie deficit, the brain still recognizes that we're trying to starve ourselves in some ways by restricting those specific food groups. So it then sends those primal urges to binge. But then there's this idea of mental restriction where, let's say I'll eat a piece of cake, which I would rarely allow myself to eat. But in my head, when I'm eating the cake, I'm thinking I shouldn't be eating the cake. What am I going to need to do to make up for eating this cake? And then how can I restrict even harder the next day? So again, that's like mental restriction. So there can be no restrictions. So I think that is like the biggest thing that has changed for me recently, is this idea of no restrictions. I eat whatever I want, however much I want, and I've never done that in the past. Previously to recent, I was doing another program, and you very heavily restricted the foods that you wanted to binge on. And I see now how that was setting me up for so many binges, because my brain was just like calling out those foods. And then I'd feel so guilty once I was eating them, so much shame, and be like, I can't believe I'm eating this food. I might as well eat all of it. This is going to be the last time. And then tomorrow, like, more heavy restriction starts. So I think that restriction is so important to identify and say, fuck you, restriction. I'm not doing that shit anymore. Enough. I am going to eat however much I want, whenever I want. That has given me so much more freedom. And then when I think this way, when this is my new mindset, then when it's like I'm eating chips, it's like, well, chips aren't off limits. So yeah, I'm going to eat these chips. Bye, chips, I'm done. And then it's like, wait, I want more chips. And it's like, okay, I'm going to have some more chips. I can eat however much I want. And that has really, really helped me to not then go into that, oh my gosh, I can never eat chips, so if I'm eating them, I should just eat all of them. And that's just been like such a game changer for me. And when I look back in my past, my eating disorder started when I was 15. And That's like when it got like more severe. But before that, I see that I wasn't happy with my body size, because that's why we restrict a lot. That's like the main reason we restrict, is because we want first person. That's the main reason I restrict. I want control over my body. So I see that before I was 15, I felt like I was losing control of my body because I was going through puberty and shit was happening at my house, and I wanted control. So that's when I started restricting, and I started depriving myself, and that started to send those impulses to my brain. And I restricted and I restricted and I restricted until I couldn't restrict anymore. So that restricting diet mentality is kind of what like fucked me over from the beginning. The next thing I want to talk about is the neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are like the spider-like things in our brain. And when we repeat an action, those neurotransmitters kind of grow together and they get easier to perform that action. So the way I think about it is, have you ever driven somewhere, like let's say you're going to the market, but then you end up kind of blanking out and driving to like your friend's house by mistake, being like, how did I get here? I didn't even like know how I got here. That's like that neurotransmitter. You've driven to your friend's house so many times that when you were unconscious and you weren't paying attention, your body and your mind just naturally drove you there. That's this idea of neurotransmitters. When you perform an action so many times, that action gets easier to make. So that's how I feel like the compensating. So whether you do that through exercise or laxatives or purging or restricting even more the next day, all of those are, I just said the word, a hard word for me. You know what I mean. When you try to make up for that behavior, to make up for your binge. I don't know why I put binge in air quotes, but so when you practice that, when you practice throwing up after every time you binge, or whatever it is, those pathways get more hardwired. So that just becomes the thing you do. And it's like there's been so many times where it's just like, how the fuck did that happen again? Like, how did it happen? And it's just, it's the habit. The habit's just been so ingrained, and it's so hard to break a habit. The habit of just sitting with fullness. I've done that so little that habit is much harder. That's like trying to drive to a cabin you've never been to with no GPS. Like, it takes so much awareness because you haven't done that trail before, compared to driving to your best friend's house. Like, that's just so easy to do. And so I really think those two things play such a role in how I've gotten where I've gotten. I've had that diet mentality. I always restrict. I've always labeled foods. That restriction has always set up my brain to send me those messages of, you must eat everything. This will be the last time. Like, make it so wonderful and epic. And then after I do that, I'm just hardwired, and like, not hardwired because I've created the hardwiring through repetition. But then it's like there's the compensatory reaction of like, now I need to get rid of the food. And so this time in recovery, what has been so helpful is just saying, fuck the diet mentality. The diet mentality, which I could make so many more videos on, that says that we need to restrict so we can control our body, because if we can control our body and to get it to look a certain way, then we'll be happy, then we'll be successful, then blah, 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 blah. And then you can only do that for so long, then you'll naturally binge because the brain is hardwired to keep you alive. And then after you binge, after I've binged, I've hardwired that neurotransmitter path in my brain so hard that then there's just this another action I take. And it's so hard not to do it because I've done it so many times. In yoga, they call it samskara. It's like a path that's repeated so much, it's so hard to get out of, like a groove in a CD player. Like, it's so hard to get that needle out. So it's been a practice to not restrict. When I feel myself wanting to restrict, I identify this as the diet mentality. Restricting always leads to binging. Famine always leads to feast. If I don't want to binge, I cannot restrict. I can't label any foods good or bad. I have to eat whatever I want, when I want, and make sure I'm eating enough, eating more than I think I should be eating, at least right now in this phase of my recovery. And then the second one is making my other neurotransmitters stronger. So that's a cool thing about your brain is it's neuroplastic. It can change and it can grow. So every time I eat and I sit and I feel my fullness and I play with my family and I do anything other than make up for eating that food and trying to get rid of it, that's strengthening other neuroreceptors. And the more I don't engage in, I'm going to try to say that word again, I can't say it, damn it. When I don't engage in those behaviors to get rid of the food, that's lessening those neurotransmitters. And so that gives me a lot of hope that I can change my brain. It's not always going to be this way. But I have to take opposite action than what I've been taking for the past 15 years on and off. And I can't tell you guys, if you're trying to recover or if you're on the recovery journey and you're labeling foods good or bad, or you're not letting yourself eat foods that you want, or you're eating foods but in your head you're saying, I shouldn't be eating this, I need to make up for this in some kind of way, I'm going to restrict harder the next day, I cannot suggest enough that you say F the diet mentality and let yourself eat and turn off the signals from that primal brain that are driving you to eat, because if you're restricting, you're getting the drives to binge, and it's only a matter of time that you act on it. Something that really helps me is looking at body positive stuff and researching the brain. So there's a great book called Brain Over Binge that I read like 2 months ago, which has really helped with this, understand that the dieting is what's causing my brain to do this, that I'm not crazy, that it's the part of my brain that's trying to keep me alive that's driving me to the food. And then after the food, after I eat the food, then I have this habit that I've refined over so many years that is just so hard not to kick in. So I hope this video was helpful to you. These two pieces of information have been really transformative for me, and I just, making these videos, it's really scary because it's like I'm so vulnerable and part of my eating disorder. I like to put on this perfect picture of like things are fine and it's great and I've got this, and it's really scary to be like, but I have this really bad habit that's killing me and it's a mental illness. And being able to share it honestly in my journey and the hope that I can be helping some of you, it's really driving me forward. So thank you guys so much for watching this. If you have any video suggestions, I would love to make a video answering your question. Hope you guys have a great day, night, morning, whatever it is. Thanks again for watching.